Welcome to my Fractional CEO Thought Leadership podcast, where we explore the future of leadership, biotech, innovation. Today, we're diving into the topic that is shaping the future of medicine, AI in healthcare. We're not just talking about futuristic AI driven doctors, but real, tangible innovations that are transforming drug discovery, diagnostics, and personalized medicine. AI is already revolutionizing industries, but in healthcare, the stakes are higher than ever. How do we ensure AI is safe, effective, and unbiased? What's the balance between cutting edge innovation and real world adoption? Joining me today is Yves Decadt, my fractional CEO member and a visionary leader who has been in the forefront of biotech and medtech innovations. Together, we're going to break down the biggest opportunities, the biggest risks, and the future of AI in medicine. Let's jump right in.
So thank you for having me, Nuno, on this very interesting but also very important topic, not just for the healthcare industry, but for all patients in the world, and we are all potential patients. So thank you.
Fantastic. So, as an introduction, AI is already transforming industries, but healthcare is different. It's high stakes. When did you first realize that AI would play a critical role in biotech and medicine?
Yeah, I have to go a few years back to answer that question. I was actually mandated by the PIF in Saudi Arabia to develop the biotech strategy for NEOM, which is the futuristic city there. And in that context, I visited an eye hospital in Riyadh. And it was a very modern hospital, and they used already AI to analyze images of the iris. Normally, the eye doctor does it himself by looking in the kind of microscope, but they already did it with AI, and they found that actually the AI imaging analysis was better and more precise than what an eye doctor could do. And also, what was apparent is that the head of the group said, she was herself a professor on the university there. She said, doctors get tired. Even they're very smart people, but they get tired. And the AI system doesn't and can do many analysis in one day. And so this was about 6 years ago, which is a very long time in the AI world. And I was really very impressed in that. And that was really kind of eye opener that said for me, look, this is going to change many things in the industry. And if we look at it now, today, actually, healthcare industry is the industry with most applications in AI. Not many people know that, but there are a number of reasons for that. First of all, uh, healthcare, well, there's a lot of money going around in the pharmaceutical industry and healthcare industry. That's the first thing. But the second important reason is there's an enormous amount of data. Yeah, data from patients, from healthcare records. And those two together make it the perfect playing field for AI.
Fantastic. And as you say, we've seen in different areas. I saw it in the futuristic city. There are several diagnostic imaging companies that are using it already, and we've seen AI go from theoretical to essential in industries like finance and logistics, but healthcare is a lot more complex. What makes AI adoption in medicine and biotech so unique for you?
Yeah, it is true that on one hand, there are so many applications in healthcare, which make it very interesting. On the other hand, it is unique because of a number of reasons. First of all, there's the regulatory complexity, there's ethical stakes, but there's also the human element. And I will expand a bit on this because it's very important to understand it. First of all, regulatory complex. You referred to finance. Well, unlike finance, where algorithms can drive stock optimizations or whatever, everything we do in the healthcare sector has to be approved by regulator like FDA or European regulation. So that makes it very difficult and slow, actually. So everything we do with AI medicine has to go through rigorous validation, but also clinical trials and so on. So very time and resource intensive. The second thing is trust. I mean, we're dealing with people. So the patient trust is really very important. And so, I mean, just a question, would you trust a machine to determine your cancer treatment? I think many people would be very reluctant. So it's very important that all stakeholders, the patients, the doctors, the policymakers can understand what's happening. And so in many areas like stock trading, it's accepted that there's a black box behind it, but that's in terms of patient treatment, that's like not accepted. So we have to turn the black box into a white box and we have to explain what's happening. Yeah, and that makes it also more difficult. And then a third thing element is, let's say, the human element. Medicine is not like car industry, one size fits all. Every patient is unique because of genetics, because of the environment, because of lifestyle, socioeconomic factors, and so on. And the result is that the data which we have to handle are very messy, they are incomplete, they're highly individual, and so it's very difficult to deal with. So those three things make it very difficult to implement AI in healthcare, but it is happening and it will happen more and more. And just to give one example, actually, there's a company called Viz.ai, and they work on stroke detection. And so they work together with FDA, so with the regulator, to implement it. And now they have an application that is approved by FDA, and they can do CT scans better than doctors. So they can identify potential strokes better than doctors. And this is a good example, actually, that even with the hurdles, the industry can actually work and implement important things.
And that's a fantastic example. And as you say, it's really challenging because one thing is the diagnosis, the other thing is the recommendation of a treatment. There are two very different things. And while in the diagnosis, it's easier to for people to accept, on the treatment side is still more challenging. But there's definitely a place for AI to help as a clinical decision support and also as a support for doctors in what is the recommendation of treatment. But there is what you said, which is there is something a lot more complex than for other industries because you're touching human lives, you're impacting human lives, and so there is potential harm to humans, and so there is a lot more the requirement of it being a lot stronger validated and open box or using responsible AI because also we don't want to have any biases in that. And so, as it continues to make this waves, what's one of the real world AI powered biotech specific innovations that has already made it tangible and measured impact?
Yeah, one application that made a real world impact. It's from a company called AlphaFold, which is developed by DeepMind. And what they did, they worked on protein folding. And proteins are like building blocks of your body, of life, actually, but they're very complex molecules and have a 3D shape. And the shape determines the function. You have to compare it a bit with like a key and a lock. The protein is the lock, and the key can be a medicine, and it has to fit exactly in the 3D structure, otherwise it doesn't work. And so the 3D structure is very important for even for diseases. Some diseases are caused by misfolding of proteins like Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, cystic fibrosis. So it's very important to determine this exact structure, but it's also very difficult. So traditionally, identifying the right protein structure may take months or years and cost millions of dollars. Now, with the AlphaFold AI model, they were able to predict the structures of over 200 million proteins, really actually mapping the entire protein universe in months. And that's really extremely impressive. Yeah, that has really made a splash, and that can and will accelerate drug discovery. It will reduce R&D costs and so on. So it has a very important impact. Just to give one example of these applications, so in the area of drug-resistant bacteria, which is a key problem in hospitals, um, the AlphaFold system identified a molecule that could be very effective. They called it halicin. And actually, it was originally a drug for diabetes. But the AI system identified that it would be a very good key to lock, let's say, to a protein for drug-resistant bacteria. And this happened in days. So really like a kind of game changer in the fight against these superbugs, just as one example. AlphaFold impact is enormous. It's also measurable, it's global, and it will accelerate. Yeah? So this is probably for me the most important example.
And that's a great example because it puts things into actionable and it's here now. And as you say, it has only the probability of improving, making it and getting faster and getting even more, given more recommendations and novel uses for even existing drugs and how to make them much more effective. But there is being these medical breakthroughs. This is one. Are there any AI-driven medical breakthroughs that you know that most people aren't even talking about yet?
Yeah, there's one example which I like a lot. It's in the area of vaccines. And when we talk about vaccines, people traditionally think about preventing infections like measles and so. And vaccines are actually wonderful medicines because sometimes for some disease you only have to have one shot and it protects you the whole life. So from a health economic perspective, it's fantastic. But what's newer is actually vaccines in the area of to cure diseases, not only prevent them, but to cure them and in a personalized way. And so we're talking here about the area of personalized vaccines for cancer. And that's something that's not so well known because people don't realize there are companies are developing this already. So what's interesting here is that, I mean, many traditional cancer treatments use so-called cytotoxic agents. So these kill in an undifferentiated way all fast-growing cells in the body, like your hair cells, and then your hair falls out. But these personalized cancer treatments, they actually teach your body, your immune system, how to attack only cancer cells. So it's very specific. So that's we call it precision medicine. And how is that possible? Well, actually, with AI, we can analyze the DNA of the tumor, of your tumor. And so the AI can then predict which mutations are most likely to trigger an immune response. And based on that, then the researchers can develop a custom tailored vaccine for your cancer. And they can do that in weeks instead of years. So this is really a more enormous progress. And many people still die of cancer every year. And so some companies working on that. We actually know them. It's Moderna and BioNTech, for instance. We know them from the COVID area, where they were in a short time able to develop vaccines against COVID. But they're now also working in the area of cancer vaccine. So this is really exciting, and it could change the cancer treatment forever. But why is this not very well known? Why are people not talking about it? It's a bit complicated. I mean, explaining how it works, and so it's a bit complicated. And I think that's probably why people are not really talking about it very much. But it's a very important evolution also.
And that's a great example and reminded me of something that started a long time ago with there was a study in the US around using T cells in order to attack the tumor, and they created the serial killer cells. But it's, as you say, is the amount of information you need to have, the DNA analysis and everything, is something that used to cost millions and millions. And now with AI is getting faster, and also Moderna, BioNTech, and so on, with the leveraging of mRNA and so on, it's getting into opportunities in order to almost develop and program these new treatments, which is absolutely fantastic. But how do we balance this hype around all the AI and the real challenges? Because then there are the real challenges of adoption, integration, and regulation. And regulators, as you said, typically have, because it's a black box and we are not in a world where everything in AI is very much tracked. It has full telemetry and is a completely blank box that you can triage and understand exactly why the decisions were made, which is one of the pieces that regulators require. So how do you balance this, and what are the challenges that you see coming through from that perspective?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question also. When we talk about the hype around AI, mostly we talk about what's open in the public. People talk about large language models, ChatGPT. What is more hidden and work happening in silence is what's happening in healthcare industry. So we're talking about very focused applications like the examples we gave before. And sometimes this is, I mean, a bit too complicated to explain, and that's why people don't realize that. But just to give one example, I'm living in Switzerland, and there's a major pharmaceutical company here called Roche Pharmaceuticals, and they're one of the leading companies in the world actually on AI applications in healthcare. I went to one speech in the company, and they said they're working on 150 use cases just within the company. And so that's really quite amazing. But yeah, how do we balance then the AI hype with the reality? Well, first, there has to be a sense of realism. AI is a tool, not a magic bullet. So AI won't replace doctors. It will, let's say, augment their abilities. And like the example from Roche, the real impact today is in narrow AI applications, like in analyzing images, predicting analytics in hospitals, and so on. And that's where the real AI applications are happening. But as I said, they're very narrow, very specialized, and that's why they're not so well known actually in the general public. So the second thing is that on the hype in healthcare, AI must prove itself in clinical settings. I mean, and that's a difficult thing to do. People must prove that AI works in clinical studies with diverse real world patient populations and so on. And that's not so easy. And then, of course, another thing that we have to be realistic about is that when we talk about AI, if we want to implement it in the hospital, we have to work together with the humans, yeah, not against the healthcare professionals. And so that's a real hurdle for adoption. Yeah. So the AI systems has to really fit in the normal workflow of the doctor, otherwise, we won't trust them, and it has to be explainable. But there are some companies or organizations that do very well already. One example is the Mayo Clinic. It has really successfully integrated already AI and patient care in the treatment of the patient. So that's one of the leading groups in that. Overall, I can say yes, there is a hype in AI. In some areas, it can be implemented very quickly, and every citizen can see the effects of it, like with ChatGPT. But the AI in healthcare, for the reason explained, will not go so quickly. It will not be a revolution, but more like an evolution.
And that's a great point because, as you said, the explainability is a key part, but also the narrow AI side, the narrow elements. Because I feel sometimes that we live in on the peak of inflated expectations around AI, and the same applies with peak of inflated fears related to AI. But as you said, it's very much about if we bring explainability to AI, responsible AI, then it becomes, when it's in a narrow environment, you can really very well explain what the benefits are, what it's doing. And from your explanation, AI suddenly went from artificial intelligence to what I prefer calling it, which is augmented intelligence, because that's where we are at this point. There are different theories and aspects where artificial general intelligence, super intelligence, and so on. But right now, we're in the world of augmented intelligence. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I fully agree with that. That's especially in healthcare. Yeah, and we can talk about that a bit later also.
Fantastic. Introducing AI in a biotech company isn't as simple as flipping a switch. What's the biggest organizational or cultural change when integrating AI into healthcare from your perspective?
Yeah, when I look at AI implementation, it's like implementing a big project. And like for any project, whether IT or another project, if you want to implement it, you have to do and think about change management. And it's not different here with AI. But there are some very specific challenges, and we have to try to handle them in the right way. So first challenge is lack of trust in the decision making. So we talked about it. Doctors, researchers, everybody involved see AI as in black box. They really don't understand how it works. So instead of saying, for instance, let's say the patient has a high risk of stroke, the AI system has to translate it and say, we found these biomarkers, and based on these patterns, that this patient has a high risk of stroke. So that's the explainability. So very important in this trust, we have to add the X factor, that explainability factor, and the X factor will transform it from a black box into a white box. And that's what we need to have in the healthcare industry. The second hurdle is the fear of job replacement. Many people think their jobs will be replaced, and actually, people, I mean, self-assigned gurus in the AI world say that so many jobs will be replaced, and that creates, of course, fear. I don't think it will be that bad, certainly not in healthcare sector. So it will not replace them. It will enhance their expertise. A bit like you said before, it will augment their capabilities. And as long you see it as a kind of co-pilot and not a replacement, I mean, that everybody will accept it. And then the other thing is the integration in workflows. I referred to change management, but like in any, if you go in an existing organization and you want to implement a new system, you have to have a flawless integration with what exists already. And the hospitals are very complex systems. There are IT systems, there are processes already implemented in each hospital. So when you try to adopt it, you have to really implement it and adapt it to what's existing already in the organization. And that will also increase the adoption, actually. So we could say, in summary, successful implementation of AI whether it's in a company or a hospital, it's maybe 20% technology and 80% is change management and cultural change.
I love how you position that there's this fear, and we need to move beyond fear, and we need to understand what is really being done and how it helps, because I'm absolutely agree with you. There is a lot of conversation about job replacement. It depends if you embrace AI or not. If you fight it, then there is a possibility. If you embrace it, then you see it as something that makes you better, that makes you focus your time better, and as your co-pilot, then no, I don't think it's going to be, it's just going to transform how we do things today versus what we used before, and focus a lot more on what you mentioned before, which is precision medicine, because that's what allows us to go is so many data points that we can't process, but that an AI system can, based on the different models that exist, which is well beyond the large language models that everybody talks about. In a highly regulated industry, healthcare, so you talked about the implementation within the company, but every change in this industry is very slow, and not only because of the change within the company, but also with the regulators. So how can a biotech and pharma companies successfully integrate AI without resistance from regulators and everybody that is within this market?
Yeah, if you're asking, can we do it without resistance? No, that's impossible. So what we can do is, let's say, implement it in such a way to minimize the resistance and reduce the resistance as much as possible. And there's a number of ways of doing it. Again, we work in very highly regulated industries with biotech and pharma. We work in very complex environments, but there are ways to do this effectively. The first important way is like to start small with proven use cases. So don't try to go to a full-scale adoption, but have a very targeted, narrow application with a clear, let's say, return on investments, and that's also viable. And that will actually help doing that. So that's one thing. Another thing is, I mean, again, on the trust, we said regulation. You always have to think about regulation in the pharmaceutical industry or healthcare industry. So we have to involve FDA, IMA, from the start, a bit like the example I gave before of the company Viz.ai, who really involved FDA from the start in the development of their app. They got acceptance by FDA, and then it's also accepted by the hospitals and so on. And one key thing that Viz.ai did is they made it explainable. The system explains the decisions that it's proposing. And then the last thing is integrating into existing flows. I mean, every hospital has a lot of data already, like electronic health record, lab systems, clinical trials, and so on. They have their platforms. So it's very important to analyze them and to try to integrate the AI system, let's say, flawlessly with all these other systems.
That's fantastic, and I love how you made the connection with bringing the regulator early on, and that's critical, and the explainability so that they understand what is the purpose, and then they can evolve as the company is evolving. Now, when we fast forward to 2035, what will AI driven medicine look like from your perspective? Will AI be running hospitals, diagnosing diseases, or even designing new drugs?
Short answer is it will do most of the things you mentioned, but I will go a bit in detail. I don't have a crystal ball, but based on what's happening now already, we can see a lot of things that will happen. What I can add here is that based on my experience in the healthcare industry, that innovations will be slower than planned and will be slower than expected. But the impact will be bigger than we will expect. That's what we see in many changes. So what can we expect actually? Well, one area we talked a bit about it is precision medicine. So it's really treatments designed for specific individuals, for you, Nuno, for your disease. So AI will analyze the patient genetics, lifestyle, real-time data, real world data, and based on that, create very personalized treatments. And so, I mean, they're now CRISPR can go very well along with AI to have gene editing therapies, for instance. Some people say this will reduce the development time for new drugs from 10 years to just a few months, but I don't believe that because of the regulatory part. So it can reduce the discovery time, but the development time, clinical development, you still have to go through the long development process, which is required for good reasons by the regulatory authorities. So that's the first thing. The second element where AI is already quite important and will be more important is in diagnosis. AI will probably handle majority of routine diagnostics. It will analyze medical scans. We gave some examples already. It can detect early stage diseases. It can do real-time patient monitoring by wearable tech and implants and so on. And this will be good for doctors. I mean, they will oversee the recommendation. They will take the final decisions. They can focus their time more on complex cases than on simple cases and use their human judgment also when there are ethical decisions to be made, which happens a lot in the medical thing. So it will be very good for the doctors, actually. So that's one thing. And then another thing is the hospitals itself. Hospitals are complex systems, they're complex logistical systems. And actually, the AI can make the whole chain more automated and more efficient. So I think the hospital management systems will be able to predict ICU bed shortages, for instance. They will prevent supply chain disruptions and so on. So more on the efficiency part. And so we're talking about smart hospitals becoming the standard, actually. And then another area where it will be very important is drug discovery. So AI will certainly help to discover more drugs, better drugs, in a shorter time. But as I said, I do believe that unfortunately, the development time, so the clinical development stages have to go through, and it will still take 8 to 10 years to develop a new drug to the market, actually. So overall, I mean, in summary, we could say AI will be a tool for very specific applications, but not a replacement of complete things. Doctors, caregivers will not be replaced. They will be augmented, as you say, by AI. And also for patients, it will be they will be supported. I'm actually involved in a company called Medicia AI, who actually now already has AI systems to help patients during the whole care for when they're treated with for oncology. So patients will have proactive information, personalized information, and also care. So overall, it's not about replacing humans, it's really about saving lives. So it will be very important.
And I love that part where we need to go, and it's about what's the purpose. The purpose is saving lives. The purpose is maintaining people healthier for longer, solve and personalize everything we do. And sometimes it's almost like the conversation is not at that level. It's at the level of almost protectionism, and we need to go beyond. And if you had a magic wand and fix the one of the major obstacles preventing AI from achieving its full potential in medicine, what would it be?
Yeah, I love that idea of having a magic wand. But there's one specific problem I would focus on. It's the data problem. The problem with healthcare is that the data are very fragmented. They're also biased, and they're hard to access. And I will go a bit deeper on that because it's really a very fundamental problem in the healthcare industry, which will slow down the implementation of the AI. I'm very happy you offer me a magic wand here, but let's focus a bit on the problem that this magic wand could solve. First of all, the data are very scattered in healthcare. They're also incompatible. What it means is that your patient record, it's locked in different systems, and maybe in different hospital with different doctors and different insurance databases. And maybe their data are in different labs that have analyzed your samples. And so it's very difficult to access those. And then there are electronic health records, which are in different systems. So with my magic wand, I would create one global standardized data infrastructure which can be used by AI, and that everything would be sped up. The second data problem is the bias. You referred a bit to it, but I mean, many of the AI models are trained on Western population, mainly males, mainly white people. And there are several examples where this leads to misdiagnosis for women, for minorities, for colored people. I mean, an example is that in the AI oncology system to detect skin cancers, well, it doesn't, they found it doesn't work well on colored people. And so with the magic wand here, I would make sure that the data are diverse and that they represent the whole population with all the minorities, actually. Yeah. Of course, this is easier done than said, but I have my magic wand. But as an example, I mean, I worked for Neom, and that in that city, they also want to implement AI in healthcare as much as possible. But there you can start from scratch. And starting from scratch in this system, in this such a situation is actually much better. And then a third hurdle with data, again, where I need my magic wand, is that regulations make data sharing very difficult. We're talking about patient data. I wouldn't want my data shared across the world with everybody. So privacy is crucial. We have to respect all these privacy rules. But with the magic wand, I would make that we have some privacy preserving techniques that still can work with that. Overall, I think it would have to be a very big and very powerful magic wand that we need to get to one global ethical data system.
And I love how you focused on the different parts of the data, because I'm a huge believer, as you said, that because of the data being scattered, it's important to go and find a way to create a standard. And the standard exists. That there's been developed the fire standard, the which HL, and those help. But there is, from my perspective, a clear challenge that also needs to be sorted with data, which is the data ownership of data. And who's the owner of the data, which in my opinion is the patient, and who's the steward of the data. Because when that is well defined, then, as you said, the privacy and all of that becomes easier, and it becomes possible to actually create a Uber lake where all our data is flowing but is still protected, but is the data stewards are responsible for keeping each of the data they are stewards of safe, which is different from the scattered world that exists today. So I love how you went straight in on that, and I agree that it would be a very strong and powerful magic one for sure. So for biotech entrepreneurs and healthcare executives who want to integrate AI, what's the smartest first move they can make from your perspective?
First of all, it's very smart to try to integrate AI already in your processes and so on. Um, but I mean, there are a number of things you can do. First of all, it's important to start with a kind of low risk, high reward use case. So what we called in the past for project low hanging fruit, and it could be in discovery and trial recruitment. But it's very important with the small case, you can actually build momentum, you can secure buy-in with all the stakeholders, and prove the value. Yeah. The second thing is that I don't try to invent the wheel and involve the stakeholders. What I mean with that, first of all, there are many AI specialists already in the world. So I would say work with them. Yeah, don't try to build all the knowledge up yourself, but then ensure that the key stakeholders, whether it's doctors, clinicians, researchers, IT people, that they're part of the team and feel part of the team. Same with regulatory advisors. And by doing that, you get early buy-in, you get early alignment, and that will actually help. And then the next stage, if you succeeded in your pilot project, is to scale it strategically. So go to areas where it's really adding value. So all in all, what I propose here is not different from any other change project. I mean, you have to really think it through, think about buy-in, start small with a pilot, and then scale it up in a kind of smart way. Yeah, because the danger is now with the hype that people think, oh, we have to do AI, and they think about big projects. But in general, big projects tend to slow down all things and maybe die even before they are successful. Yeah.
And as you said, AI is a tool, and you mention it very, very often during this conversation, is it's a tool. Use it as a tool. Don't go with the hype. As you mentioned, leverage it as a tool in order to achieve what you want to achieve faster. And thank you, Yves. This was a masterclass in AI-driven healthcare innovation, a topic that is only going to grow in importance over the next decade. If you enjoyed this discussion, make sure you follow us, connect on LinkedIn, and share. Yves, if people want to continue this conversation or learn more about your work, where's the best place they can find you?
Yeah, they can contact me on LinkedIn. That's probably the most easy way.
Thank you very much for joining us today for this episode, and look forward for future episodes and continue to learning from you.
Yeah, and thank you, Nuno, for the great questions and the opportunity for me to give this interview.
Thank you.